talk about Canada's housing market, housing affordability. Maybe let's just go back and unpack what the June numbers looked like for two of Canada's top housing markets, Toronto and Vancouver.
Larissa, the initial numbers from Vancouver and Toronto suggest that sales activity was weak in June, which is the first month in which the Bank of Canada cut interest rates. And there's this idea among a lot of people that because the rates are starting to come down, we're immediately going to see housing markets take off. The reality is that it'll probably take more time before we see a rebound. For one thing, when we talk about when do interest rates have the most impact on an economy, we talk about 6 to 8 quarters after a decision is made. So still some time before we get to that point. And second of all, if buyers are anticipating that rates are going to come down even more than they have already, that may be driving a decision to wait and see before jumping into the market. So we look past the initial numbers. We'll really want to be watching what happens after multiple months with lower interest rates.
There's various data, I should say, that is suggesting that relocation may be something that is top of mind because of high housing costs. What are you seeing?
Well, Desjardins Economics has been looking at this topic for over a year now. One of the things we're seeing clearly is that across Canada, young people are choosing to move away from places they already are because of the high cost of housing. So we're seeing a lot of people under the age of 35 leave Ontario for places like Atlantic Canada and Alberta, where housing costs are far lower than they are in Toronto and the surrounding cities. This is a widespread trend, and the recent polling that you referred to at the outset there highlights that. It highlights the fact that affordability is very stretched across Canada, and it's something that's weighing on the minds of Canadians all across the country.
Let's talk about the Desjardins Housing Affordability Report, in which you had suggested a few possible solutions. Let's go through some of those, and I guess right out of the gate, let's talk about the extension of the mortgage payments when it comes to that the timeline, the amortization.
Yeah, well, what we tried to do here was dispel some commonly held views that maybe aren't totally substantiated about housing affordability. One idea is that if we simply give people more money, that will improve affordability across the entire economy. Our work suggests that's not the case. If we were to either extend mortgage repayment periods or do some other policy that increases the amount of money available to buy a home, yes, some initial buyers would be able to get in and take advantage of that. But over time, the additional demand that creates puts so much upward pressure on home prices that affordability actually gets even worse than it would be under the base case in a matter of just a few years. So that's why we did this scenario, and ultimately increasing amortization periods just isn't a sustainable solution to improving affordability.
Let's talk about changes to the current immigration policy and a slowing population growth over the next few years.
Well, the thing about population growth is that it impacts both the supply side and the demand side of the economy. If we have very strong population growth, as we have in Canada for the last few years, that all else equal drives more demand for housing, increases household formation, and can put upward pressure on prices. But over time, we're also going to need workers to be able to fill job shortages, support our ambitions within the construction sector to build more homes. And doing that is really essential for making housing affordable over the longer run. So when we talk about reducing immigration or temporary migration, that can lower demand. It can also limit our ability to build more over the longer term. So this too is not necessarily a solution to making housing more affordable sustainably over time.
Mark, you had mentioned at the start of the conversation that home sales have been clocking in lower than average in Toronto and Vancouver. What does this mean then for listings, for new listings?
Another scenario that we looked at in our report was what would happen if Canadian listings, so the number of new properties available for sale, spiked in line with some of the periods where that was particularly strong, where there was a huge pickup in listings like we've seen in the past during the 1990s or during the global financial crisis. So we simulated that in our work. There was an improvement in affordability, but we didn't get anywhere close to what we were at between 2015 and 2019 in the next few years. And just to give you a sense, Desjardins has a product called the Affordability Index. We look at incomes, prices, rates, all the different factors that go into affordability when we're doing these analyses. And so while listings could increase very dramatically from where they are now, we don't think that's likely, but they could. Even in that scenario, we don't get affordability back to where